giant robot smashing into other giant robots.
Hey everyone, and welcome back, because this is the Giant Robots Smashing into Other Giant Robots podcast, where we explore the design, development, and business of great products. It's one with all of our hosts today. I'm Sami Birnbaum, and joining me is
Chad Pytel, and joining me is
Will Larry.
It's great to have everyone back. I was just saying, before we started recording, like I'm really disorientated because I've had an amazing week off. We've had some sunshine in the UK, which has been amazing just to get out. But Will, you look like you're in a new location.
I am. We have moved probably 20 minutes north of where I was. I've never met anyone that says they love moving, and it's a reason. Like, oh man, it was a lot, and I still got like hired people to do the heavy stuff, and it was still exhausting a lot. But we're here. I'm enjoying it. The kids love it. They've been bouncing everywhere, backyard. We're in a cul-de-sac too, so it's perfect for the kids riding their bikes and scooters. So definitely upgraded.
Do you, in your old house, people had to like walk through your office? Do you have an office of your own?
I do, and I can lock the door and say, "Hey, don't come in."
The dream.
I know. All the hand signals in the old office, like, "Don't come in, don't come in." So yeah, I think I'm gonna do. I think you said this, Chad, like on air sign outside the door.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm gonna set that up.
Yeah, my son got it for me. I think it was for Father's Day, just a little on-air light, and I hooked it up to a smart switch, so I can turn it on and off from my computer.
Did you ever? I think you said you had a bug in it. Were you able to fix the bug? Something with your audio?
That was. I wrote a script that whenever my webcam was on, it would automatically turn on my key light and that on-air thing. And the way it worked was it would pull in the background every minute looking to see whether my webcam was on and turn it on if it was, off if it wasn't. I don't think that was the actual problem, but I was having terrible audio problems with my computer. Eventually, the only way I could fix it was to completely reformat the computer, go back to a fresh system. And when I did that, I never set up the scripts again because just one, it was like overkill, but also just on the off chance that it was actually causing the problem, I didn't want to get into that situation again.
Yep. I totally understand that.
So now, like an animal, I need to click buttons in order to turn on my smart lights.
Yes.
So today we're going to give some project updates about what each of us is working on, what we've learned on the project, some interesting tidbits. Folks know that I am working on Ready, Set, Go, which we've talked about on the show before, and we live stream every Friday, the development of that. In fact, after a short break, after we finish this recording, I'll be on with Lewis on the stream doing that. So that's what I'm going to give an update on. Let's just go around and share what each of us is going to give an update on, and then we'll circle back and do them. Sammy, what are you going to talk about?
Yeah, so listeners might kind of know about this because you hear little bits here and there. As when I'm speaking with guests, I always kind of chime in about what I'm working on. So I am still on this crypto trading application. As you know, we're a consultancy, so we get put across many different projects in different industries. And this has been my first one in the crypto or trading world. So it's been a real eye-opener. But yeah, I can definitely share some updates and some lessons learned. How about you, Will?
Yeah, so I'm going to share on two projects that I worked on because I think one was like 2 or 3 weeks, and then the other one was a week long. So the first one was it was a volunteering app to where they wanted using location data and geofencing to automatically log someone's volunteer hours. And I'll tell you the key part to that later whenever I discuss it. But that was that part. And then the second one was someone had built a web app with, I'm blanking. What's the AI? Lovable.
Yeah.
Is it Lovable? Yeah, Lovable. And so they built that with Lovable, and then they wanted me to turn that into a mobile app in a very short time period. So, so we'll talk about those two.
Okay, awesome. What's first? Should I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So as a refresher, Ready, Set, Go is a thoughtbot product that we are working on. And speaking of Lovable, it's meant to solve one of the challenges that we see, which is people use Lovable. And while it's great to a point, the gap from Lovable to a real production application that we would feel can be worked on and taken into the foundation of a future product is a lot bigger than most founders realize. Also, we do design sprints at thoughtbot, and we are using Claude Code to build really high quality, rapid prototypes. And what we started to see is if we do that in Rails with a real database, and then we are getting closer and closer to a foundation of a product that it's not just a prototype anymore that we need to throw away. It is something that we can continue to work on after the sprint. So we saw both of those things happening, and we said, we think there's an opportunity here to essentially create something like Lovable, but instilled with thoughtbot's best practices in terms of code quality, test-driven development, all those things that we've built up over our 23 years of experience, and generate an application using AI that does what Lovable does, but also it's built in Rails, backed with a real database, full test-driven development, as a full, almost production-ready application that we can then, that anyone, but especially us, could then take and actually bring to production. So that's the promise of Ready, Set, Go and what we're working on. We, as of now, I think it's been 5 weeks since we started development in earnest on it. We have a full command line version of it that essentially works to that promise, is able to generate Rails applications with test-driven development, with the agent doing test-driven development. I'll talk about some ideas we had for how to make that work and what we've done. So the CLI version, the command line version, was the sort of what we were calling Hello World. It was, let's not spike it out because we did test-driven development. But we knew that the final version wasn't going to be CLI, but that doing more than a command line version was more work. So we did a command line version of it, built in Ruby, that was able to do everything that the core of, we believe, of Ready, Set, Go needs to do. That was working. So then we started to build an actual web app version of it, pulling in those pieces from the command line version that were reusable. And so you'll see today on the stream that we have just gotten to the point where you run the Rails app, you have the chat interface on the left-hand side, you have a preview pane of the application being built on the right-hand side, and you have the full agent being able to generate Rails apps and do development of them with test-driven development without any intervention from you as the user.
That's pretty, that's quite quick to have got there. Does it feel quick?
It is quick. And someone commented the same thing the other day. And I think what we're finding is that because we're building on, I said this on the stream to, I think it was Lewis or maybe Rob, we're building on things that we've spent decades putting together. So it's like the application uses suspenders to generate the Rails application. It runs a bunch of command line, command line tasks. That uses another thoughtbot gem called Terrapin, which we wrote 15 years ago when we introduced Paperclip, and we needed to call out safely to the command line for conversion of images using image magic. So we're taking all of these pieces of things that are ready to go and we're putting them together. Then when it comes to the agentic stuff, that is like more of a trial and error. Like we have the pieces ready to go. There's not a lot of code that needs to be written, but we need to figure out how to put things together and then try it out. Like, okay, let's generate a recipe tracking application. And then we see where it goes off and we say, okay, how are we going to solve that problem? The thing that's actually taking time is like when you hit like a snag. Like the other day, once we spun up the full Rails application, we found that when it was generating the new application, and again, this is all happening within the same Ruby process, and it's calling out bundle commands, and that stumped us for a while. That it was, no matter what we did, it was bundling within Ready Set Go's bundle, not the generated Rails applications bundle. And it took us a while to figure out, oh, that's what's happening. That's why nothing is working. And how do we solve that problem? Well, bundler, you wrap the calls in bundler with unbundled env. So it's things like that where like it's just, there's some snag. Takes a few hours to figure out how to work around that or how to deal with it.
But practically, so under the hood, it's this command line tool that you have that is sent to a Ruby application.
It is. So when you type
it's a Ruby application which accepts command line things. But when you're using the command line, are you saying like kind of generate new Rails app and then it goes, and then, like, what does it do practically behind the scenes?
Yeah, so we've written a bunch of tools that are tool calls that the LLM can call. So there's generate new Rails application, edit file, run specs, run a Rails generator, run a rake task. Those are...
So as soon as you type... So that prompt is going to an LLM. The command line prompt is an interface for an LLM, which has certain tools?
Yeah. So you might say something like, okay, I want to create a recipe tracking application. There should be recipes and ingredients and measurements and some text description and describe the features that you want. And then it will start to build that application using the tools that we've made available to it. The key thing, if you've used Claude Code before, you might have a Claude MD file which describes the rules that you want it to follow. And you'll be a human in the loop reviewing the work being done. And you'll probably notice that oftentimes it will start forgetting the rules in your Claude MD file, or it will start getting off track and you need to stop it and correct it. Or it produces some code that it's just not the way that you think it should be done, or it's not high quality enough. So you need to stop it and fix it. Or correct it. What we're trying to do with Ready, Set, Go, and this will be we identified it as one of the biggest challenges that we want to try to shoot for and solve, is not to have to do that, because our ultimate user is a non-technical user. So we want to be able to have a system that is like a thoughtbot person is doing it, but it doesn't get off track. It stays on track and it generates something without intervention from a non-technical user. And so the idea that we went into, and I think I mentioned this on the show when we talked about it before, is that we actually have multiple agents running. So you have the main agent that knows how to use all those tools and generate an application and is following the user's instructions. Then we have right now 3 other reviewers that review everything that's being done and reject it if it doesn't match what that reviewer is looking for. So we have a quality reviewer, a TDD reviewer, and I'm forgetting the third reviewer. And so those reviewers are reviewing the work of the main agent. And if it looks like the agent didn't do TDD, it rejects it. It's basically PR review, but at every step of the way. And so we baking in rules of those agents, and those agents are very focused on a particular task and only reviewing that. And the only thing they can do is they just reject it. And so the main agent knows that all the work is being reviewed by these reviewers. And so when it gets a rejection, it knows which reviewer is rejecting it. So like the TDD reviewer rejected it. So that means I didn't follow TDD, and goes back and reworks it to follow TDD.
Did you use that word rules intentionally? Because I've literally just pulled down main branch after coming back from PTO. And like loads of rules have come into my project and I don't know what they are. So Claude /rules /something.md. Is that what you're referring to?
So we're not using, so some of these things are the same thing that Claude has started to build in as well. So the concept, calling it rules, is now something that's in Claude code, but we're not using Claude code.
I understand. So then the other thing which I'm trying to work out is when you say, generate this recipe tracking app, the Ruby program is currently running on someone's local machine. So is that creating new like directories on their machine with all the kind of Rails code? And then, so that was a nod for the audio listeners.
Yes.
Chad nodded. So yes. But then is it also like, because one of the things I know we spoke about previously wanted to get to is, and it's creating it creates like a Postgres database, or what we have a database, we would recommend. And then it runs on their local machine for them. And I know you spoke about perhaps using Docker containers to make that simple. Like where are you with that? Does it just run like a local app?
We're ignoring that for right now. The only people who can run it are people who already have a Ruby development environment set up with Postgres already installed.
Okay.
That's a future improvement. Right now, our first target is thoughtbot designers and developers using it themselves in a design sprint. So we figure it's a reasonable trade-off to have a development environment. But yeah, eventually what we want to do is bundle up the whole Ruby development environment inside of a container so that you don't need to have it installed. Ultimately, it's going to be a web app on the internet that someone can sign up for and use.
Right. Because when you speak about the UI interface, I just did that thing where I did UI and then said the word interface. That's going to annoy people. When you talk about the user interface, it sounds like you were saying like there's some kind of prompt area, so like an input field where you're able to kind of send the prompt through to the Ruby program and the LLM. And then on the right-hand side, it's maybe showing you what your application looks like. So is that on the right-hand side, that's actually going to localhost 3000? So you've got two things running. You've got two things running. Go on.
you've got the main Ready, Set, Go application that runs like a Rails app that you just started. Then when you are working with Ready, Set, Go to create a Rails app, it makes a new Rails app in a Ready, Set, Go playground inside of a directory, and it starts the server. That's one of the other tools is run Rails server. So it runs the server. We actually just yesterday made it so that it gets a free available port and and runs the server on another port. So on the right hand side, that's an iframe that is showing the other Rails.
So that's
server.
showing like localhost 5000, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it. That's really neat. Just that, but that's like a great start, because that's like you say, someone who's got a Rails machine is ready to use that, and the interface is when you then prompt it. Is the idea? I guess you don't need to auto refresh. You can reprompt it, and then I can't remember what availability it gives you in an iframe.
Yeah, and we also have Hotwire live reload, so it automatically refreshes anytime the page changes.
Okay, just like if you were editing your own kind of code on your machine.
Yeah. And then right now on the left-hand side, you can see everything that it's doing. So you can see every time it runs the specs, every time it edits a file, there's a log of everything that it's doing, just like in Claude Code. What we envision eventually is that some of that stuff will still be available, but like less visible than it is now. More like there's tools being run, and that's a log you can look at, but the main like sort of thing you have is more of a chat back and forth where you're not seeing every single tool that's being used along the way. Because especially now, like with Lovable, or even with Claude Code, if you're not working in a certain way, you're doing a lot all at one time. You're basically being like generate tons of stuff. With Ready, Set, Go, it's different because it's doing test-driven development. So it writes a failing spec. It runs the test to see that it's read. It then writes the code to make that test pass. And it goes back and forth like that a lot. So that's not really interesting for a user to see. And so it's also slower. That's one of the things that we'll have to contend with. It's much slower than just generating everything all in one go. But I also believe that it's important to producing the level of quality that we ultimately want it to produce.
I want to go back to consistency. So you're saying that you have like the rules or the checking. How consistent has it been? Has it been pretty consistent, or are you still running into some of the stuff and you're still tweaking it?
I think we've reached a base level of consistency that made us comfortable. Okay. So we moved on to like, okay, we're comfortable with this. So now let's move on to building the full Rails application from the CLI. Like, so yeah, I think the true test will be right now we're doing like not fake app, but they're not like things that like we're delivering, right? Yeah. It's like, okay. And we also, we want to let it run for 15, 20 minutes generating the application, but we're not then like stress testing that for hours. So I think the true test will be once we start to use it internally on product design sprints to really use it for real. The nice thing about it is it's just working in a directory on your machine. It makes a Git repo. It's checking in every step of the way. You can see everything that it's doing. So when we're using it internally, even if it starts going off the rails and you're like, Ready, Set, Goes, we've reached the limit of what we want to do. Well, you can always just go into that directory and use use your editor, use whatever tools you want to use. It's a real Rails application just sitting there on your computer. So we always have that. So I wouldn't be surprised if the first people who use this internally at thoughtbot are like, okay, cool. Ready, Set, Go generated my Rails application to thoughtbot's best practices using suspenders. It's got all our default stuff. I've built out the first few features of this, and now I'm going to open it in Claude Code and my editor, and I'm going to take it from there. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, and that's not necessarily a failure. I think that's part of the product development cycle that we expect to go through. It's like, okay, let's talk about that after. Where did you feel like you needed to leave and go to your editor, and why was that? Okay, what do we do to solve that so that you don't need to do that in the future? It'll be super interesting when we get to that point. I think, we do new sprints every few weeks at thoughtbot, so it shouldn't be too long before we're able to give it a try on an upcoming project.
And are you using a local LLM?
The short answer is no. The longer answer is I did hook it up to a local LLM a few weeks ago, and it worked just as well.
Oh, that's cool. Did it take longer? What was the downside?
It was so slow.
Oh no.
I have an M4 MacBook Pro with a Pro chip in it. It was really slow, and the fans were like going. It was my computer was going to like launch off my desk. But it worked.
So now as it's kind of going through testing, it's hooked up to Claude.
It's hooked up to Claude, yeah. And
that's just through like a company account or with like an API key.
Yeah, with an API key. Yeah. And the main agent thread uses any model we wanted to use, but we're using Opus 4.6, so the latest model. That's the main thread. The nice thing is the reviewers are much simpler. They have a simple task that each of them does. So they use a cheaper, less expensive, a faster model.
On an Anthropic model, though?
Yeah, but an Anthropic model, yeah.
Yeah, but it'd be like you could get to a point where, there's the potential two offerings where you can offer the service, someone can use a local LLM, or they can put in the API key and say that they want to go really quickly and use Claude, or whatever else is, the best at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll have to figure out what I was just talking with Lindsay about this yesterday, because if ultimately the goal is a web app that people can go to at like Ready, Set, Go, I forget what domain name we bought, .dev, something like that.
Yeah.
We have a challenge, which is Lovable has taken millions of dollars of investment, and you can go to Lovable and use it for free to start. And they're just happy to give however much money that costs to OpenAI or whoever they're using behind the scenes. We are not in that position. So we may have the best product in the world in terms of the quality of the applications that it generates. But if you need to pay up front in order to even see that, to even try it out, that might be a barrier for us. So we're going to need to figure that out and work on that.
But I don't know if we're competing with Lovable in the same way, because a lot of people with Lovable are going there for that to be kind of the destination. So like, I want to produce something on Lovable and then it's ready to go and that's it. And I'm done. Whereas we're looking at kind of a different market of people who want to go on a software development journey, but they want to reduce costs and validate very quickly at the beginning. So we might find like we're looking at people who do have the time and potentially do have the money because they were looking beforehand at, let's say, £30,000 to get off the ground, and now that's heavily been reduced.
Yeah, possibly. Well, figuring out the market and how we position it. I think it is a lot to ask, though, for someone to pay up front before they know that it will give them the results.
And I also would say, like, a little pushback on Lovable. I think there are people out there, and I think like I had a client that was in this situation that think, oh, I am building a production app and it's ready to go. And they have no idea, oh, if I get a couple thousand users on this is going to bog down and crash pretty much.
Yeah.
So,
The other thing we often see is that there's almost no consideration given for security.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's another thing that we want to do with Ready, Set, Go is that it has security built in from day one.
Yeah. But how do Loverpool do, like, you made out like they don't care about like the money aspect, or they have more wiggle room there. How are they just running at a complete loss? Is that like a business model?
So. I think so.
Then what do they do?
Then you upgrade to a paid plan to get. Do you know what it is, Will? Additional features, your own domain name, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll look it up right quick because
But like, what would stop Ready, Set, Go operating in the same way?
We just don't have the thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to let free users generate applications willy-nilly.
But Lovable are doing it because they have enough volume of premium users. Like, how do they have that money?
Oh, it's a VC backed company. They don't need to work. Like, I don't know the dynamics around Lovable and whether they're profitable or not. But profitability is not a concern really when you have a VC backed company. Traction.
Right. Okay. But that's what people, to that point of like, well, I don't know how we're going to do it because we can't give away X amount of money. If you were to look across at Lovable, you'd say, well, go and get VC backed. I'm not saying that's the ethos and the model we want to. I was just interested in like, how are they doing it then? Okay, so that is the answer.
Yeah,
and that comes with drawbacks in doing it in that way.
Yeah, and they kind of. I just pulled it up, so they kind of. I think the biggest thing that I'm looking at from free to pay is like user roles and permissions, custom domains. That's probably you get more credits, but those three are probably the biggest.
Yeah.
They go from free to paying.
And that is how they limit it on the free plan is that they have the concept of credits, right? And you're using your credits as you use it. So we may be able to do something like that where we say, we can actually afford, if we have a good conversion rate to paid, a certain number of free credits where we're just losing money on that. Or paying for that LLM usage in the hopes that people upgrade.
Or we sell like advertising. So when you prompt, right, the response comes back. Have you seen that? Have you seen that in the wild yet?
No, not yet. But we're about to see it everywhere.
I saw it. I saw it. Whether it's real or not, I don't know. But someone had like used an LLM to set up like their GitHub repo or their project from the beginning, and in the README it had put an advert. So when they looked at the README, there was like a link and an advert to some sort of product or service. I again, whether that's true or not, or they were just looking to get a lot of views. But maybe that's what we do. Maybe that's how we kind of blow the market apart. Is we start heavily advertising.
Yeah. If we put in all the source code that Ready, Set, Go generates, having a problem with this, contact Thoughtbot. We'll help you.
Yeah.
You can also do, when you prompt something, a 30-second like ad in there where you have to wait for it. Sam, that's a good idea. I see where you're going with it.
Okay. We've spent a lot of time on Ready, Set, Go. Will, how about you go next? Because you speaking of Lovable, had that 1 week project to convert something that Lovable had done into a mobile app. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I'll start with that one. So that it was a 1 week project, and the goal of the project, or the goal of the week, was to take this Lovable app. So, and I learned a lot in this. So Lovable is built with React, Superbase, and I forgot what else. So it was totally different app than what I was used to, because like everything is in that super base. Like the environment keys, everything is in there. And so it was very interesting. So, man, how can I start? Where do I start with this? So they built the app. It was full of features, packed full of features. And so my job was they wanted a mobile app. Lovable says go to Capacitor, and that just wasn't the best fit. Like we use React Native. We felt like that was a better fit. So what we came up with was to wrap it in a web view and then get it ready for shipment by the end of the week. And
did you wrap the remote thing on Lovable, or did you eject from Lovable, get all the code for the React app, and put that locally on the mobile device?
No, I wrapped Lovable because they were still using Lovable in it to add features and things like that to it. So yeah. And so what I really did was just added an entirely different repo. That way I didn't touch the Lovable, the web app, because it's just, we're linking back to it. And so it was a lot of hurdles. I think the timeline was one of the hurdles. And we went into this project saying this is a trial. Like, we're seeing this a lot, so can we do it? And so going into it, because that was my first thing whenever I was on the project, we're like, 4 days to get this to app ready. Well, where Apple was saying, yes, it's ready to go. I was like, that's a lot. That's tough. But I was able to get it probably 80-90% there. I think what I didn't do the marketing stuff to where you have to do like the screenshots and the blurbs and stuff. I didn't have time for that, but I was able to get majority of it there. Some of the stuff that I learned with it was one, I feel like Lovable almost gives you a false sense of hope or a false sense of this is the correct thing. So like what I'm learning with AI is that analogy of like a basketball in my hand or a soccer ball in my hand versus a pro athlete is totally different. And so I feel like this is with AI, a non-technical person versus a technical person. So, with AI, even in the project, there is some stuff I'm like, no, this is not what we do. Like, let's back out of this and do it a different way. But I was able to see the non-technical user use it. And whatever it says is the truth. Like, it doesn't matter because they just don't know. And I totally understand. I get their situation and things like that. But it was some stuff that I was like, that's not the best thing. And that's actually going to open you up to security issues and things like that. So it was very a learning project, especially for empathy towards non-technical users who is using Lovable. Because I also had to have the tough conversation at the end. Is like, so I was asking questions and I was like, what is your goal with this app? He's like, man, if it catches on, let's push it out and do, thousands of users. And I was like, okay, so let me help you understand. Like, you actually need a back end because the way it's set up, React was doing the back end with just Superbase fetching data. So there is no relationship, no true relationships, nothing serving as the back end. And there's a lot of stuff that they wanted me to fix. So like there was one that had like a screen that had like 8 tabs on it. And he was complaining, saying like, anytime I touch a tab, it takes forever to load. And I had to explain to him, I was like, yeah, like, because you're loading 8 different web pages at the same time. And he was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like I'm pulling data. And so I had to have the hard conversation with him, like, hey, this is good for now, for raising money, for things like that. But to have a true production app, you need something like, and that's, I'm glad that we're doing Ready, Set, Go because I think it'll set them up for a better trajectory, like to put them on the path of like, oh, I don't have to do that much to have this production ready and have users on it. So it was a very interesting, I got to see into the owners and the technical founders' mind. I think the tight timeline was due to AI. After asking questions, because AI does this in this amount of time. Like, so why is it taking more time to do it. So like, or we even ran into a bug, and I didn't get mad. I understand what they're doing, but we ran into a bug, and he was like, "Oh," he just like copied and pasted what Claude like said about it. Like, this is how you find the bug, and I was like, okay, like I totally get what you're saying with that, but that's not how it works, and like it's actually taking us down a path that's going to waste time. And I was able to fix the bug, and I had to get hands on with the bug in the app and stuff. So it was a very interesting week, just getting into the technical or the non-technical founder's mind and how it works and what they're thinking.
It sounds like a really interesting project. I don't envy that timeline, but what you said there about there is a slight issue where AI is kind of clouding how long things can take. So yes, it has really sped some things up, but when the risk is higher and you know, like you're saying, you're going to go down a wrong path in fixing a bug, you do sometimes need that human intervention to just take time and understand what's going on. And yeah, it's hard to kind of get that across and explain that, no, we can't just use AI for this, and this is why it's going to take a bit longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. The I think that thinking back to like when we did tests, when we were first starting out, there was this common sort of perception that test-driven development was slower. And we really believe in test-driven development, and we wanted to do it. And we didn't want to be in a position where we were getting any pressure about not doing it. And so we were very incentivized to figure out how to be so good with test-driven development that we were as fast as other people. And that also made us create tools like FactoryBot, shoulda, like that allowed us to do testing in the way that we wanted to and at least be fast with it. And it feels similar, like some of the dynamics now feel similar, which is we care a lot about quality. We care a lot about what is produced and that it is to the level and to the production quality, but also to the code quality that we want to achieve.
Yeah.
But we exist in a world where a lot of people don't care about that in the same way that we existed in a world where a lot of people didn't care about test-driven development. They only cared about speed and results, even if it messed them up later on.
Yeah.
And we said, no, we know a better way of working. We'll show you how to do this to what we want, because that makes us fulfilled as developers, but also higher quality products. I feel a lot of the same pressures now, which I get excited about that because I see the opportunity, right? Like thoughtbot became thoughtbot in that environment, and it worked out really well for us. And I see the same thing happening again, and I see the same opportunities. How do we square those two things? How do we square our values and our love for the craft and love for what is produced and achieve that in an environment where it's like, no, we'll show you, we can do this, we can work this way. It's, I see the opportunity. I get excited by it. I know other people get demoralized potentially by it as well.
No, I think that's a perfect analogy of what you're saying. So like test-driven development, like to everyone else, you're like, oh, it slows you down initially. Well, it slows you down. But then anyone that actually works on the app and that's been on it for a year or two, and you're like, oh no, I can actually go faster now because I trust the test and it's working and things like that. So man, that's a really good analogy, because like I feel like that's what was happening. Like I could have done it the bad way and they wouldn't have known. And that's like some clients, they say, oh no, we don't want tests because it's going to mess us up. But like it's that, yeah, that's a very, very good analogy with that one. So yeah.
Right. And one is, someone pointed out in an internal that one's, I don't think it's equivalent. I'm not saying that it's equivalent. One's a tool, one's a practice, but the feeling of it feels very similar to me in terms of, if we can figure out how to do things the right way from the beginning, it's going to make it so that we don't slow down later on. We see that in our tools as well. Like when we're using Claude Code to generate a new application, we're going quite fast because it's a green field and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit and a lot of code that can be produced.
Yeah.
But there is a point where if you don't do it right, if you just do too much all at once, the tools start to break down because you've just got a bunch of low quality code that you don't understand. But if you can do it right from the beginning, and sometimes that does mean going a little bit slower, you can avoid getting into that spot. Cool.
Well, and I wonder. Yeah, go on.
No, I was going to move us on.
Oh, no, we're all going now. You were going to move us on. I'm going to say one more thing and then move me on.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're yet to see that impact with AI development in terms of seeing what these projects are, 4 or 5 years on or as they grow. And then kind of see, okay, that is the impact of like the way we did build it.
Well, my goal would be, if we can do it right, that you will look at something produced by Ready, Set, Go and not be able to distinguish it from something that thoughtbot didn't write.
Yeah.
That would be the goal, because I don't think that the tool is used for everything. So we need to produce something that a thoughtbot developer can open in their editor and be like, this is like I wrote it. This is like my colleague wrote it. And I can work on it and I understand it. That would be the ideal, I think.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
I was going to talk about the second part, and I'll do it real quick. The other project that I worked on. So that one was geofencing with location data. So both of these are mobile apps. And so one of the big hurdles is explaining to especially non-technical people or anybody that hasn't had to deal with Apple, like the rules they make around mobile apps and stuff. Like you have to jump through hoops. Like, and they're the people you have to go through. Like they have the market share. The gatekeeper. Yes, that's a perfect one. They're the gatekeeper. So you have to follow the rules. So on this app, the one thing that I held back was with volunteering, they wanted to track the location data of minors. So in theory, if this was app with 18 and older, no problem. We could have done it. Apple wouldn't have had an issue with it. But anytime you have location data with minors, that is a huge hoop you have to jump through that I learned on this project. And especially Florida. So I live in Florida. So, and the non-technical owner, he lived in Florida. So we went off of their rules. So they actually have a law that you cannot track minors' data for no reason unless it is essential to the app. So like Life 360, Find My app or Find My phone, Google Maps. And so for that project, and this is why I love consulting, it was a little different. This one was about the legal stuff. What does it look like legally? Can we do this legally? So that was a fun app because there was some stuff that I didn't know. So like we tried to do it through Bluetooth, but Apple sets it up to where you track your location data when your Bluetooth is on. So things like that was something very interesting that I learned that, and I think he had the best, his heart was in the right place. He was trying to do the right thing, but location data for minors, somebody else is not doing the right thing. So trying to figure that out and go through those hoops were interesting.
Were you able to do it, or did ultimately it wasn't possible?
No, we were able to do it, and it was funny because the law. I took it as this. The location data is not essential for this app, but the designer I was working on was like, I actually can make a case for it being essential. So what we did, so we built it for like if you're 18 and older using the app, and kind of said, hey, this is what it will look like, but you have to go to a lawyer, a privacy lawyer, and you have to get that worked out. Like if you can get it worked out, yes, we can build it, no problem. If not, we have like 3 or 4 other solutions that we came up with. Like one was NFC, where you tap when they're there and they'll tap when they leave. So that didn't take location data, so it was all in the tap. So we came up with alternatives to it, but that was a very interesting one, just because that had to deal with the law and how that affects us.
That's really interesting. I'm really happy we're like running out of time, because then I don't have to
you don't want to talk about your project.
That's why I have to go fast.
How about you? What's one thing that you've learned while working on this application?
Okay, great question. And interestingly, it's not going to be about the domain, although the domain knowledge has been really interesting in terms of how crypto trading works. The main thing I've learned from this, it's a mobile app that allows people to trade cryptocurrencies, and that includes like what they would call on-ramping and off-ramping, so getting physical cash in, which is called fiat, and also getting cryptocurrency out. So it kind of like the full life cycle of being able to trade with crypto. The biggest thing I've learned though from it is that design is really, really important. So we don't have a designer currently on this project. And I think for it to be successful, which will be part of my recommendations, is that it needs to have some level of design that takes it to a level beyond what else is out there in the market. So from a technical perspective, it's pretty regular in the sense of that the software that we're building is essentially wrappers around existing exchanges. So around existing platforms that handle the deep technical work of making trades on the blockchain. And that makes sense, right? You want to be standing on the shoulders of giants, and you don't want to be reinventing the wheel. These things exist, and we can piggyback on, these APIs. But I do think to be a real differentiator in the market, it's going to be, I think it will be critical and vital for them to have a designer on that will make their application really stand out. And I don't know if you agree with that. Like when it comes to an application existing in a market which is already slightly saturated, they do have one, I guess, USP, which is that they're meeting compliance. And that is something which helps them. But I still don't believe they're the only application which meets compliance. So if they were the only one, then it's like, right, we're selling based on, we have this compliance and no one else does. So trying to get that message across, especially I think in an AI world where people feel like, maybe I can just prompt and say, what should this look like? Or I can look at applications. Like the expertise of a designer, I think could be the make or break of this application and how profitable it goes on to become. So you heard it here first, a developer like sticking up for designers. I mean, what's going on with the world?
I think that's, and to bring it sort of all back together, I think that's a real risk with not only Lovable, but the general tools of what we're doing. We see that everything sort of looks the same. There's patterns that sort of emerge from marketing sites to the actual applications themselves. There's a sameness to them, but in the hands of a skilled designer, they can work quickly to create something which is really awesome and unique. And I think that's important because not only for product success, but like, again, sort of what we said, I think, Will, it was the show where you and I is like, if we're not doing the creative parts as humans, what are we even here for? Like,
Yeah.
this is the part where, like, you know, let's do the awesome stuff as humans.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
That's the soundbite.
So thank you everyone for joining us and listening today to this wonderful Giant Robots episode. It was great to catch up and give updates on our projects. You can find notes and a complete transcript for this episode at giantrobots.fm. If you have questions or comments, you can email us at host@giantrobots.fm. This podcast is brought to you by Thoughtbot. I've got it right, haven't I?
I'm like, you clearly have it in front of you this time, as opposed to
I do. I can't because I can't do it off by heart, so I've got to pull it up. And do you know what? I've done really well. I've done a good job.
You did.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
You can find me at cpidel@thoughtbot.social.
And me at LinkedIn, William Larry. Sam, I did have a question for you.
You go on. You get me on LinkedIn, but Will, the question's more interesting. Go on.
Where do I invest with crypto? Where do I get the money from?
Don't do it. I'm just like, don't. I don't know what I can say, what I can't say. Maybe I'll take this out, but you take it out if I can't say it. But I know, like, as building the platform, like, most of the money, it seems the revenue for the, I don't know what you call them, the providers, comes from fees that they take on transactions and like markups on like the value of actual coins. So I'm a bit confused by the industry, but it feels like, you know, when they say in gambling, like the house always wins, it kind of feels like it's that scenario.
Yeah.
Which is I mean, that is the revenue model for a broker, essentially. That is in any trading platform. That's how a broker works, and they take fees on the trades transactions. So yeah, my advice would be don't do it. But you're an adult, Will.
That's why I say
do what you want. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for listening. If you disagree with that statement, email hosts@giantrobots.fm. We'd love to get your thoughts on crypto if you're listening. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.